Since this is work of 3 architect, we will present it trough generic narrator, work of urban solution of BOAN in function of agricultural activation. The subject of research of this paper is the location located in the municipality of ŠAVNIK, the rural settlement of BOAN. The paper Urban Solution of BOAN, ŠAVNIK Municipality, in function of agricultural activation is an analysis of the current state of the rural settlement in relation to the quality and quantity of activities. The level of urbanity and identity of a certain space depends on the urban functions, contents and activities in that space. The subject of the research is a settlement that has suffered a large exodus of the population in the past decades, and requires bringing it to a new purpose. The space is currently neglected and left to its own devices, non-functional and without content that would restore the population. In order to achieve quality and rational use of space, as well as preservation of the environment and historical heritage, all facilities that have passed the categorization of creditworthiness are retained at the mentioned location and their contents are integrated into the new settlement and thus, along with newly designed facilities and contents, completes the whole project which will revive this settlement. Methodology in process making an urban solution provided are as follows: urban planning approaches, analysis and assessment of the current situation, valorization of the space of the ambient, introduction of car and pedestrian paths, introduction of new tourist and trade facilities, agritourism zone with eco-lodge accommodation, integration and promotion of service, business and central activities. Starting basics of the program task. Approach to the development of an urban project. The main goal of the project is the reactivation and valorization of settlements in the direction of sustainability through tourism and agricultural potential. Guidelines for achieving urban development from the aspect of spatial and urban planning. Revival of settlements as an urban and agrarian regional center. Revitalization of the ambient whole. Revitalization of hotel space and construction of a central park. Reconstruction of street infrastructure, expansion of communications, installation of parking lots and bicycle paths. Starting basics of content development. The form of intervention as part of reactivation is protection, rehabilitation, reconstruction, demolition and construction of buildings in places that were previously devastated. Protection, preservation of the existing identity, preservation of the urban identity of the facades in whole or in part. Rehabilitation, general improvement of the existing condition in the form of traffic interventions, upgrades, renovations, modernizations, reconstructions. Reconstruction, minor interventions, extension of buildings, construction of new ones that fit into the inherited urban and architectural patterns, interventions in traffic. Demolition, removal of buildings that cannot get an adequate function, thus increasing the yard space and gaining ground floor areas, seating areas, green areas, etc. Intervention, place analysis, location, context, documentation. Topography. The settlement of BOAN is located in a natural amphitheater, which was formed between the river Tusinja and the slopes of the mountain Sinjavina, in the zone from 1000 to 1100 m above sea level. Most of the terrain within the plan is a slope of 10 to 30%. The terrain is relatively favorable, southwestern orientation. Geomorphological characteristics. The hinterland of the settlement, in which the terrain rises towards Stickye, Bear, and Jellic Valley, is very steep and prone to erosion, slope over 30%. A part of these natural areas susceptible to the effect of erosion is also included in the DUP, Detailed Urbanist Plan, so that, with adequate measures, valuable construction and agricultural land can be protected. Geoseismic characteristics. According to seismic surveys of the area, PPO ŠAVNIK, Analysis and Assessment of the Current Situation, 2005 to 2006, the probability of earthquakes in the region of BOAN and the entire municipality of ŠAVNIK, with certain effects at the observation point, according to the derived expressions is 63.2%. Based on the new map of regionalization of the territory of Montenegro, it follows that the entire territory of ŠAVNIK can be assessed with a seismic intensity of 7 degree MCs. This data is in accordance with the values of seismic parameters obtained on the basis of seismic analysis, since it was determined that within a return period of 100 years, with a probability of 63% in the area of ŠAVNIK can expect an earthquake with a maximum intensity of 7.2 degrees MCs scale, GEA with a maximum soil acceleration of 9.3% G, which is in accordance with the content of the new seismological map in 1987. The Tusinja River originates in basic characteristics of the space. The BOAN settlement stretches on both sides of the Miloš-Zabliak regional road, which is one of the key shortcomings in the spatial organization of the settlement, somewhat mitigated by the low frequency of traffic during most of the year. From this direction, which is the backbone of the settlement, a small number of streets are separated towards the upper and lower part of the settlement, including the local road to the villages of Strug and Malinsko, which passes over the river Tusinja. The exceptional natural beauties of the municipality of ŠAVNIK, such as mountains, rivers, canyons and other landscape units, determine the future strategy of economic development and progress in terms of optimal and sustainable use of these natural resources. The interaction of the geological and pedological background factors with the biodiversity features of this area formed an original landscape connected with the neighboring regional units of Dermita and Sinjajavina. Most of the space is covered by pastures. The area is characterized by a large diversity of flora and ecosystems with numerous endemic, relict and endemo-relict species. Complexes of various forest ecosystems are also present. The natural resources of the municipality are water, drinking water and hydro potential of rivers, meadows and pastures, medicinal plants and forests. The main natural resources are meadows and pastures. Of the total area of the municipality, meadows make up 12%, and pastures 44%, the rest are arable land and orchards 3%, forests 19% and barren land 22%. Purposes of space and built structures. Historically, the oldest part of the settlement was built on a natural terrace above the river and represents, for this area, an atypical, relatively compact group of buildings. Part of the buildings towards the Suvoda stream is arranged in a regular sequence, and the rest, towards the Mioska, Zabliarka road, are freestanding buildings, in a short, intermittent line. The other two significant groups of buildings are located above the road. These are the hamlets of Zikovici and Barchi, formed as traditional fraternal agglomerations, formed along arable land, with houses at a relatively short distance, along the edges of meadows and orchards. Houses are facilities for permanent but also for seasonal stay. Typological buildings mostly belong to the category of family houses. The dominant stories of the buildings are P+1 to P+1+ park in terms of shape. They are mostly simple geometries. Rectangular bases with a gabled roof. In the late 70s and during the 80s of the last century, a hotel, a textile factory, an ambulance and a school were built in the settlement, with accompanying housing capacities for employees in industry, health and education. One part of these facilities is in a very bad condition today. The textile factory stopped production, and the hall facilities were removed. The residential buildings in which the employees of this factory were housed were mostly abandoned. Only 3 more families live in 2 very unconditional wooden barracks, while in the multi-family housing facilities, built for the needs of employees in the health and education sectors, about half of the housing. One spatial urban plan of ŠAVNIK, EBKOW, 2014. 15 These units are empty. Despite the privatization, the hotel has not been operating for a long time. The department store is also out of order. The age and condition of the construction fund are very uneven. Some buildings are almost a century old, some residential buildings, a post office building, and the last buildings built were built in the mid-80s. It is noticeable that, as a sub-municipal center, BOAN developed certain central and production functions, in order to satisfy the needs of both the native population and the population of the gravitating rural settlements of the Uskok region. Free, undeveloped plots on the territory of the plan are most often covered with low or medium vegetation, and in the steeper parts of the plan are forested, covered with quality high vegetation. Today, BOAN has only 45 inhabitants, and the volume of economic and social activities takes place at a minimum level. The river Tushinja flows along the southern border of the settlement. The Suvodo stream, Mkasika, also flows in the middle of the settlement. Traffic infrastructure analysis. The settlement formed along the river Tushinja, developed the traffic network along the main traffic route of regional character ŠAVNIK, Mioska. The street network within the plan developed spontaneously, following the construction and development of the settlement, and largely adapted to the specifics of the terrain without specific planning and project documentation. Only a part of the streets is under asphalt, but without sidewalks, so the movement of pedestrians is unsafe and takes place mainly on the road, noting that the settlement is small in area, so most trips are done on foot. The existing regional road R18, Tusina, Mioska, which leads through the settlement with the flows of transit traffic, has unfavorable technical elements considering the condition of the road and the cross profile. The local road to the villages of Malinsko and Strug, which leads across the river Tusinja, is also with extremely unfavorable technical elements. Technical regulation of traffic is at a low level and it is necessary to renew the horizontal and vertical signalization. Arranged public parking space does not exist except for the plateau along the regional road in front of the hotel, which serves as parking as needed. Bicycle movements are negligible in the area of the settlement. Suburban public transport is organized and intercity transportation across. Transit lines leading to the regional road are 18 with a stop at the hotel. Problems, objects, strategy. Problems of the selected context. It is necessary to raise the quality of living conditions in the settlement in order to create preconditions for the stay and return of the inhabitants. Creating conditions for the development of the settlement and its gravitational environment. Preservation and improvement of natural potentials of the space and their harmonization with the created elements of the environment. Preservation and promotion of natural values and beauties as well as unique mountaineering culture. Objectives of the selected context. Establishment of a functional traffic network to enable better accessibility of certain zones of settlements and connection of settlements with neighboring zones. Equipping the settlement with the necessary services and enriching the offer of service and central activities. Creating preconditions for the development of rural tourism through the development of accommodation tourist capacities and their promotion. Promoting the development of smaller processing capacities, e.a. primary processing of livestock products, fruit growing, collection, drying, processing and packaging of medicinal plants and forest fruits. Creating planning preconditions for better infrastructural equipment. Shaping the visual identity of settlements through raising urban levels. Protection of characteristics and identity of mountain landscape and construction typology with monitoring of the principles of modern architecture and the principles of sustainability. Environmental protection through the concentration of construction in the settlement, thus avoiding unnecessary occupation of agricultural land. Defining the strategy. Spatial revitalization and urbanization. The goal is the gradual homogenization of the urban fabric and the formation of the center along the road Zabliak-Mioska, which will lead to raising the level of urbanity of the settlement. It is also important to preserve the traditional organization of the settlement, that is, the traditional rural way of grouping family buildings in hamlets and nurturing the character of the traditional architecture of this region. Functional revitalization and development of BOAN settlement as a local center, creating preconditions for quality life in the settlement through the introduction of content and directing the direction of development towards agriculture and tourism, which should encourage the stay and return of the population. Explanation of the concept, idea. According to the concept, the territory of the settlement is divided into 6 zones, zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This division is more functional than spatial, arising from the need to revitalize the settlement. Since the settlement was formed around the main road Zabliak-Mioska, it was thus divided into northern and southern parts. The natural center of gravity of today's settlement is located at the intersection of the Zabliak-Mioska road and the Suvodo stream. In that sense, and with the aim of clearly defining the center of the settlement and raising the level of urbanity, the plan plans the concentration of various contents along these directions, as well as the arrangement of public urban spaces through forming Zone 1, zones of central activities. Forming Zone 2, zones of commercial activities, purchase center, where the construction of facilities intended for the widest range of commercial and service activities of farmers, etc. is planned. Commercial facilities that should meet the basic needs of the inhabitants of gravity rural settlements in this area. Forming Zone 3, the central grouping of old residential buildings is recognized as ambient whole with special values and a clearly defined regime for landscaping and future construction. The protection and arrangement of free areas of this zone is envisaged, which should keep the character of traditional mountain architecture. By forming Zone 4, Hotel Zone BOAN, by revitalizing the hotel and arranging new public urban spaces which visually communicate with each other and define the identity of the center of the settlement, and at the same time create an environment for gathering and communication of people. Arrangement is planned Central Park along the Suvodo stream. Above the existing hotel, arranging the bed of the Suvodo stream hiking trails along it as well as landscaping of protective greenery, arrangements monumental plateau, on which the existing monument to the fallen soldiers from the Second World War is located. Forming Zone 5, in the vicinity of the public institution of the primary school Kotlika Bogdan, which will import the tourist potential during the school holidays with sports and recreational facilities. For these purposes, the schoolyard and sports fields within it are connected to the sports and recreational zone, and at the foot of the plateau where the camping settlement is planned for eco-tourists who camp under the open sky. Tent camping. Forming Zone 6, Eco-Lodge Zone, at the foot of the ambient hole and the road Zabliark, Mioska, an eco-lodge settlement is planned, considering the location, quality of the land and the richness of the water. This zone is ideal for agrarian eco-tourism. Urban model. Urban model which was guided in the development of this planning solution was to see the existing problems as well as the new needs, population and potentials of this area, and to be in line with that he plans a further direction of settlement development. There are two basic types of the model: spatial revitalization and urbanization. The goal is the gradual homogenization of urban tissue and the formation of a center along the Zabliark-Mioska road, which will lead to an elevation levels of settlement urbanity. It is also important to preserve the traditional settlement organizations, e.a. the traditional rural way of grouping family facilities in hamlets and nurturing the character of the traditional architecture of this climate. Functional revitalization and the development of the BOAN settlement as a local center, creation preconditions for quality life in the settlement through the introduction of content and directing the direction of development towards agriculture and tourism, which should encourage the stay and return of the population. Zone 1 and Zone 2. Zone 1, zones of central activities. Zone 2, zones of commercial activities, purchase center, where the construction of facilities intended for the widest range of commercial and service activities of farmers, etc. is planned. Commercial facilities that should meet the basic needs of the inhabitants of gravity rural settlements in this area. Zone 3,4 and Zone 5. Zone 3, the central grouping of old residential buildings is recognized as ambient whole with special values and a clearly defined regime for landscaping and future construction. The protection and arrangement of free areas of this zone is envisaged, which should keep the character of traditional mountain architecture. Zone 4, Hotel Zone BOAN, by revitalizing the hotel and arranging new public urban spaces which visually communicate with each other and define the identity of the center of the settlement, and at the same time create an environment for gathering and communication of people. Arrangement is planned Central Park along the Suvodo stream. Above the existing hotel, arranging the bed of the Suvodo stream hiking trails along it as well as landscaping of protective greenery, arrangements monumental plateau, on which the existing monument to the fallen soldiers from the Second World War is located. Zone 6. Zone 6, Eco-Lodge Zone, at the foot of the ambient hole and the road Zabliark, Mioska, an eco-lodge settlement is planned, considering the location, quality of the land and the richness of the water. This zone is ideal for agrarian eco-tourism. Thank you for your time.